Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Well, another week has passed and the coronavirus scare is still going on. And during this time, I've really tried to focus on things that could take my mind off of the stressors of everyday life. Such as, I have knitted a blanket, I have grown a garden, and I've knocked out a lot of my to-be-read pile. Which these are things that I've wanted to do anyway, and now I just simply had the opportunity to do them. So, making lemonade out of lemons, you know? But I understand not everyone is as privileged as what myself is during these times. And so I just want to say I hope that you are doing well. I hope your loved ones are doing well. And if you are under the weather, I hope you feel better soon. But with that said, let's go on and talk about this weekend's book review, which this weekend I'm reviewing the sci-fi horror pulp classic, The Puppet Masters by Robert Heinlein. Now, the first time I had ever heard about this, I was a preteen, and I had heard about it because the movie had just been released, but I was unaware that it was tied to a book. So the fandom for the movie came first under this circumstance. And Friday nights, I would always stay with my parents and we would watch horror movies. And then Saturday, Sunday, I would stay with my grandparents and we would have a really big lunch at the house. And if I had been good in school for that week, they would let me rent a movie off of their satellite. And so as I was scrolling through like their pay-per-view channels, I came across The Puppet Masters and the trailer looked pretty cool. So they let me rent it, I watched it, and as soon as it was over, I had become a dedicated fan to this work. But as I had mentioned, I did not realize it was based on a book, but like decades later, that's when I discovered, oh, Heinlein was the author to this. And even though there was a book available for me to read, I just kind of held off on it because I know that Heinlein was a hardcore sci-fi author, and I'm just really not into hardcore sci-fi. But I decided to just work my way up to it, so I had read other sci-fi pulp horror books before this one, and then when I finally got to this one, I was really excited to see that it was not hardcore sci-fi, even though it did have sci-fi elements to it. And also, it was just a lot of fun to read because I felt like I was really getting a tangible sense of how the very first alien mind-altering slug came about in fiction that has also inspired different movies and books in modern-day fiction. The strange thing about The Puppet Masters by Robert Heinlein is that this is only available in print and audiobook. And for some reason it's not available in ebook, which I don't know why that is. But if you want to go for a print copy, just make sure you go for an edition that's 1990 or later, because that should be the complete text. And the audiobook is dated 1998, so that's a complete text as well. And the narrator who read the audiobook did a superb job of bringing this book into the spoken word, so I highly recommend the audiobook. But if you try this out, here's what you can expect. The lead character is named Sam, and he works for an intelligence agency known as the Section. And they're so secretive that not even the United Nations know about them. And they really have this vibe like they're the Men in Black, but they are never really called the Men in Black, they just feel like they are. But his new mission is, he and another agent by the name of Mary are supposed to escort their boss, who is known by the name The Old Man, and they are supposed to go to a scene in Des Moines, Iowa, where a spaceship landed like 17 hours ago. And what followed this is one of their agents had called the old man and said that there was like little creatures coming out of the UFO. And after that, no one heard anything from him. Well, they end up going to Iowa, and the three of them act like they're just one big happy family, and they're here to see the spaceship, and it's more so just to see if the spaceship is real or if it's a hoax, and they go under the guise that they are a family so they can be incognito. Well, once they get there, they discover that the UFO is in fact real, and it is not a hoax whatsoever. And by the way, the people who own the property that the UFO is on, they're charging people to have their photo taken with it and to go inside. So we totally see the whole capitalism side of things. But after they leave the site, the old man decides that he's contacting the United States president to say that they need to do a state of emergency. And the president is like, well, you just need a vacation. It's nothing like that. You just go have a vacation. Well, since the government is not doing anything about this, surprise, surprise, Sam ends up going to the Library of Congress and he does some research and he sees that these aliens have landed on Earth since the 17th century, and they've done this every 30 years. But this time, they mean business. And what has started in Des Moines, Iowa, now has spread from town to town and city to city and state to state until the whole nation is under a pandemic, and no one can be trusted because these little suckers, the aliens, they get on your spine and they puppeteer you and make you do what they want. In 1949, paperback editors approached Heinlein's agent saying they wanted a story inspired by True Magazine's indication that flying saucers belonged to aliens from outer space. Due to this, The Puppet Masters became published as a serial in Galaxy Science Fiction magazine from September to November in 1951. But during its serial release, the editor for Galaxy Science Fiction cut 30,000 words from the manuscript and rewrote some sections. And not until the 90s, after Heinlein's death in 1988, would there be a restored release of this classic. As far as inspiration is concerned, The Puppet Masters is the daddy of the alien slug, as it later influenced a parasite known as the Starborn Thing in Judge Dredd, the venereal slugs in Shivers, an episode of Doctor Who in regards to alien spiders that disappear into people's backs, Night of the Creeps, and many more. Also, the creators behind the movie The Brain Eaters were successfully sued by Heinlein for plagiarism. Fun facts. For this segment of the video, I had ended up using the book The Collected Pulp Horror as a reference so I could gather up some information. And here's some facts about Heinlein that you might want to know before you read The Puppet Masters. As an author, Heinlein was a pioneer of hard science fiction, and he was the first science fiction author to break into mainstream magazines. Eventually, Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, and Arthur C. Clarke were considered the big three of English-language science fiction authors. Aside from being an author, Heinlein was an aeronautical engineer and a retired naval officer. As far as his philosophies were concerned, which these philosophies bled into his work, Heinlein strongly felt freedom was important to the individual, and he was a strong anti-communist. Also, he became a nudist after having fallen ill with tuberculosis, and becoming a nudist was one of his forms of prescribed recovery, which this led to him being a pro-nudist. Now that we have that out of the way, it's time to move on to the spoilers section of this video. And this is going to be where I discuss some scenes and character development that could ruin the experience of this book for you. So if you wish to skip this section, just go down to the comments section of this video, and you will see that I have a comment pinned at the top with a timestamp in it. If you click that timestamp, it will redirect you to the thoughts section of this video. Now you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go. Now that everyone has had a chance to click away, I want to talk about a few of my favorite scenes as well as a missed opportunity. But before I discuss those subjects, I want to talk about how kick-ass the aliens are in this book. And truth be it, the alien is nothing more than a slug. But what makes this so creepy is when that slug attaches itself to your spine, it can tap into your brain by going through the back of your neck. And once it does that, you are its bitch. Which, I mean, this is probably why the book is called The Puppet Masters, because once it attaches itself to your brain, it puppeteers you around, and you have no other choice but to do what it wants. And by the way, the aliens are called Titans, and that's because of a planet that they came from. But what I've really found interesting about the Titans was that they weren't just this mindless organism that wanted to take over a planet. They were actually intelligent. And they were patient too. But also at the same time, like, they have the ability to outnumber us in a hot minute. Because if they want to multiply, they can do this faster than 2 rabbits screwing. And it also seems like the Titans have a personality. Because there's this one scene where you have 2 people and they have the Titans on them, and the Titans are kind of bored, and so they decide to start pitting people against one another, kind of like a dog fight or a chicken fight. So it was interesting to see how they understood that you could get entertainment out of cruelty. And so as far as the whole development of the aliens in this book goes, very original. Now, scene-wise, my favorite scenes in this book, it's hard to narrow it down, but I would have to say it goes down to like 3 different moments. The first moment is where Sam has a Titan that gets attached to him and it taps into his brain. And up until this moment, we really don't understand what the host goes through when the alien attaches itself. But when we get the alien that's on Sam, we understand that the host gets into like this dreamlike state. And it makes it where they kind of feel like they are just seeing double vision of everything. And even though they're coherent, they're kind of like just deep within their subconscious. And the Titan is really just driving their body. And it's like they're a passenger. And it kind of just gives you an idea that the host gets into this mindset of going with the flow. So that was some pretty cool insight to get. The second scene that I was really impressed by is after they get the slug off of Sam's back, Sam is manipulated into having the slug put back on him. And it's either he takes one for the team or Mary's going to do it. And the reason why is because the old man wants to try to get answers out of the Titans. And the only way to do this is to attach a Titan to a person. And so Sam ends up doing it, and they do the whole little question and answer routine, and they end up torturing the Titan so much that it dies. And the only real answer that they got out of the Titan was that it came from another universe. But that was kind of an interesting moment in the book. And the third moment that really stood out to me was where Sam and Mary, they end up getting married, and they go on their honeymoon to his cabin in the woods. And once they get in his cabin, he discovers that Mary has had like one of the Titans piggybacking on her. So he tackles the bitch to the floor, and he decides that he's going to burn the Titan off of her because it's not getting off no other way. And so the only way he can do this is if he tackles her over to the fireplace and burns it off, which he successfully does. But the way this is constructed, it makes you think that he's actually going to kill her before he can even save her. And the intensity of all of that, it just makes your adrenaline rush. And of course, the Titan does get off of her, but then it goes on to his pet cat. And me being the cat lover that I am, I'm like, oh God, he's going to kill the poor cat trying to get this thing off of its back. But luckily enough, he's able to save the cat as well. Of course, he kind of burns the cat a little bit, but he has no other choice. And at the end of the day, he does save Mary and the cat from the slug. So that was a relief. Now, onto the missed opportunity. This takes place in Mississippi, and Sam has discovered that there is a Titan invasion on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So he and a few agents go down to the Gulf Coast, and you have where a zoo nearby, all of the animals in that zoo have escaped. And all of the animals have Titans attached to them. And with there being people all around, this was a great chance for all of the animals just to go batshit crazy and kill a lot of people. And we know that they were capable of doing it because with the Titans, they have that sixth sense of entertainment. I mean, hell, if they pit two people against one another like animals, then obviously they have the ability to do some really horrendous shit to the human race in regards to controlling animals. But instead of us seeing a bloodbath here, that just doesn't happen. And even though I was a little disappointed with that, I had to remind myself, primarily, this is a science fiction book. And it is something where horror is not the primary focus, it is just the side item. I honestly don't have anything to bitch about with the characters in this book. I mean, everyone in here is so well developed. And, for example, the old man. Okay, he has so many layers to his personality. Like, you believe he's this hard ass, and he does a few things that seem dirty. Like, for example, he manipulates his son into his son having a Titan put on his back so they can gain answers. And even though some of his techniques are not really ethical, it is honestly the best he knows to do. And he's trying to do the right thing so he can find out how to blow these little shits to Kingdom Come and bring Earth back to a state of normality. So I honestly believe he's the kind of character who's put between a rock and a hard place, and he does what has to be done. And with his demeanor, I honestly feel like the movie casted perfectly when they decided to have Donald Sutherland play as the old man. Because when I was reading this, all I could see was Donald Sutherland as this character. Now I want to talk about Sam. Sam is fine as hell. And the thing is, talking about layered characters, he is another fine example of a layered character. Because the thing is, with him, we have this whole little ego cockiness thing that's going on. But at the same time, he is a badass. And he will do whatever it takes to protect his loved ones and to get through the day and try to save the world. And most importantly, he stands by Mary's side through everything. And I really feel like he was Fox Mulder before the X-Files was even a speck in the universe. And truth be it, Lord, oh, if he and Fox Mulder ended up being a team together, I would be moister than an oyster. Sorry about that little scene of nudity there. I just needed to make sure there wasn't a Titan on my back while I was talking about Sam. But let's move on to other characters. Let's talk about Mary, because she is a badass female character. And from the moment she steps on page, she has like this Sigourney Weaver vibe about her. And she has the ability to be playful and sultry, intelligent, and the list continues. But in the nutshell, she is a badass, and I loved Mary. And she really had just a really shit hand dealt to her throughout life. I mean, to start with, she was born into a cult, and then when she became an older child, she was abducted by aliens where one of the Titans attached themselves to her, and the only thing that saved her was she caught a 9-day fever that ended up killing the Titan, but she was able to recover. And then all of these years later in her adulthood, she gets another Titan on her back, and she gets burnt to hell and back by Sam trying to save her. But luckily enough, she's able to heal from that and move on. But you know what? Everything happens for a reason, because she's able to say, hey, I had a 9-day fever. It's what killed these little bastards to start with. So let's get everyone sick and then give a vaccine where it will save the person, but in turn, it won't save the Titan. And so, hey, you think you got a shit life? Things happen for a reason, and Mary is a prime example of how everything is for a reason. Theme-wise, The Puppet Masters presents quite a few different scenarios that are fairly creepy. The first one is you cannot trust anybody because everyone is against you and they're all out to get you. And this is not only just in regards to groups and strangers, but also in regards to loved ones. And even though this is a reoccurring theme in the sci-fi horror subgenre, it is yet to get old for me because I feel like it is a very tangible fear and a lot of people can relate to that fear. And as long as it's presented under different scenarios like the books that I've read so far, then it's going to remain fresh for me. The second concept that I found to be disturbing was the fact that the Titans were totalitarian. And this comes about because when a Titan attaches itself to its host, that host loses their ability to be an individual. And they have to fall under the whole concept of the same thought process, same goals, same actions as everyone else. They have to obey and comply. And so we see here the fears of having a mass group of organized thought. But we also see the fears of losing your individualism, which Heinlein was a firm believer that you should remain an individual. And you should fight and do whatever you can to maintain your individuality. And at one point in the book it even says, and I might be misquoting this, but it says, the price of freedom is the willingness to do sudden battle. And in regards to being an individual and maintaining that right, yes, I believe you should fight for it tooth and nail. Now, one thing that I found to be very interesting about this book when I read it under these current circumstances is there are two parts in it where different projects are presented to the nation. One project is called Project Suntan and another one is called Project Bareback. And with these, people have to undergo what would practically be a nudist colony. People have to practice nudism here. And this is so people can see who is being controlled by a Titan because the individual in front of you is naked, so you can see if there's something on their back controlling them. And what really affected me with this is under the current circumstances, even though we're not being like attacked by aliens and we're not becoming a nudist America or anything like that, the compliance that people are having to undergo for their safety reminds me a lot of the precautions that we are undergoing for the protection of ourselves with the coronavirus. And so in that regards, I did make a connection there, and it was something that really made me just focus on the times right now, which was kind of a downer, but it was something that I was able to just kick back and kind of make that comparison to, and it was interesting to do so. Although I had been a fan of the movie, I just honestly did not know what to expect from the book. And that was more so because everyone kept saying Heinlein was hardcore sci-fi. And even though this is sci-fi, there's enough to it where it's not hardcore. And I really did like his ability to create dread and the whole paranoia sense of not being able to trust anyone. And I really like the fact that he is able to treat his characters, his plot, and his setting all equally important. Plus, there's the originality of the Titan alien that was just really cool and a trendsetter. So I am also going to go out on a limb here and say if you've never read Heinlein before, this is a good book to start with. And I've never read any of his other books at this point, but I do feel very strongly that this is a good starter point. And overall, I highly recommend this book. It's something that at the time people had considered like perverse and everything because of its subject matter. But seriously, in today's standards, this is like rated PG. So don't expect anything that's like gory or overly sexual, even though there's like a lot of insinuated stuff and it doesn't go into great detail about that, but your mind just fills in the blanks with it. So if you're looking for something that's not extreme, but it will make your adrenaline rush, then this is totally a book for you. Since The Puppet Masters is really a groundbreaking book that presents an original alien, what is another horror book that you would recommend that has an original alien in it and that really just set the stage for other horrors to come after that? Load up the comments. My second question is, and this one isn't going to be a deep thought-provoking question or anything, but I am interested to read a little bit more of Heinlein because it seems like out of the sci-fi books I've read this far, he really takes time with everything he does, and it was just a really great form of escapism. So what is another book by Robert Heinlein that isn't too hardcore sci-fi and still has the horror elements such as what the Puppet Masters did? Load up the comments. And with that covered, it's now time that we close the video, and I would like to say thank you to Lisa G and Joseph Baylott for contributing to my Patreon account. If you would like to contribute to that as well, the link to my Patreon is in the description section of this video, and for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if you are a creator of some sort, I'll also list what your profession is when I give you a shout out. And also, I do have a $10 tier as well, and this is so if you want, you can donate $10 a month, and I'll still give you that shout out at the end of each video, but also once a month, I'll send you over some of my photography, and this will be one photo image of some creepy artwork that I've done. So if you're able to do that, that's awesome. If not, no sweat whatsoever. I just hope you continue coming back to this channel and having a fun time so we can just talk about books and geek out together. And if you would like to contact me on social media, please use the description section of this video as well. You'll see that I have links for my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because I have more book reviews in the near future. And with that said and done, I hope you have a great week, and until we meet again, sweet nightmares.